What up, friends? The sun burns my skin, and today we're going to be reviewing Bad Bunny's newest album, Un Verano sin Ti. This is the fourth album overall by Puerto Rican rapper and singer Bad Bunny. Now I've dipped my toes into a fair share of the indie sides of Latin pop, but this is going to be one of my first glimpses into the more mainstream side of the genre, alongside reggaeton as well. After all, Bad Bunny is kind of the embodiment of the scene at the moment, certainly one of the most prolific artists in the genre right now. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect going in, whether he would stick to the tried and true Latin pop sound or maybe incorporate some hip-hop flair to it. This album in particular kind of sounds like a Latin pop-inspired Drake of sorts, with a moody trap-inspired pop aesthetic, alongside having a bit of Latin pop and rap flair as well. Honestly, it's not a bad project per se, but the length is what really kills this album for me. Many of the songs on here are decent enough, but there's not nearly enough variety or energy to justify this album's runtime. After a fairly standard opener, Después de la Playa is probably the album's first real highlight, I think. The psychedelic and hazy sounding synth and beat are pretty interesting, and the whole track has that sort of lazy day at the beach aesthetic to it. The vocals, similarly, have a sort of hazy layering over them that fits the song's mood, but then we transition into a more traditional reggaeton sound to keep the energy going. There's also some slight flamenco influences, it seems, as well, especially in the piano and the guitar. I'm also really digging the subtle brass on this track, feeling very warm and lively, fitting the sensual yet party-like vibes of the lyrics. Porto Bonito is definitely an example of the album at its weakest moments though, feeling very drab and lifeless with this simple and monotonous beat and vocal pattern. The vocal effect on this album isn't always bad, but here I feel like it largely strips away a lot of the energy that this song needed, and Chencho Corleone uses it to some kind of obnoxious degrees. The beat stays the same, the instrumental is boring, and the lyrics also don't really have any sort of clever wordplay or wittiness to them, or really any personality to them at all. I just don't really think there's anything here, unfortunately. Titime, Preguntó is one of the better songs on this album, though, I think, with a great bass-driven groove. It's very funky, and the vocals, I think, have a lot of attitude to them. I'm loving the snarky vibe in the drums, and the lyrics, while kind of your typical flex anthem about how many girls he gets and stuff like that, are pretty funny when he pairs them with his auntie asking him how many girlfriends he has at the present moment. The sampled vocals and guitar that pop in occasionally also add some nice texture to the track, I think, and I'm also really digging that ending moment of the song where we slow the beat down a bit and get that hazy and psychedelic aesthetic back. It's really smooth. I'm also really digging La Codiente, as it has a darker beat, but it still keeps the drive. This is a good example of the vocal effect done well, and that synth, man, it's seriously a vibe. The flows are good, and Bad Bunny and Tony Dize are a pretty good combination, I think. Their vocal cadence matches each other pretty well. There's a good amount of melodic and mellow moments, alongside some flashes of intensity to keep things interesting. The lyrics about Bad Bunny wanting to hook up with a dominant and assertive girl are pretty amusing, and I appreciate him not going for the sort of weak woman stereotype. Party is another pretty boring one, I think, almost treading into house territory at times, especially in that sampled chorus. The vocals, again, aren't really doing much for me, feeling kind of monotonous, and the cadence just doesn't have those interesting inflections that I feel like an energizing song should have. The slowed down portions of the track also kind of break up the pacing in an awkward way. Again, I can appreciate the confident woman angle in the lyrics, kind of approaching this hookup with a mutual respect of sorts, but the instrumental just isn't really hitting. I'm loving the sax intro on Ojitos, Lindos, and Bomba Estero's verse that she has going on here. Her whole intro, it's just really cool. The beat feels right at home here, being fairly simple but also accenting that sax in a really warm and mesmerizing way. The two distinct vocal styles from the two artists on here are a very intimate combination, I have to say, and I also like the sort of instrumental subtlety that we have going on here in comparison to many of the other songs on this album. I also love how the sax sounds a bit distant as well, like it's representing the longing nature of the lyrics, like you're trying to find someone who you truly connect with. This one's one of my favorites on the records, for sure. El Apagón is a really interesting one, I think, having a deep drum presence, but also a sort of distant and spacious instrumental. It's sparse, but kind of in a good way, and I'm also really digging the drumsticks being used to add rhythm to the track. However, after a while, we are transported back to 2012, and we are now listening to an EDM song, and I think it kind of kills the vibe that we were establishing up until this point. I don't think it's terrible, and it does have a pretty good groove at times, especially in the outro, but Every so often, it just feels like kind of an awkward combination of sounds. Otro Atardecer is definitely my favorite on the record. I love the Marias, man, and this was a pretty cool combination with a sort of indie sound to it. I'm thinking the lush drums and quirky guitar, and the harmonizations between them are also really fun and welcoming. The instrumental is smooth, and the vocals have a nice combination of naturalistic vibes while also having that vocal effect at times as well. The lyrics also have that very endearing lost love aesthetic to them, very similar to Ojitos Lindos, actually. There's honestly not much more to say, it's just a great and vibey tune that does a good job doing what it does. The last song I wanted to talk about is actually the last song on the record, Callaita. I think it does a great job at ending the project, bringing back those wavy and psychedelic synths for one last hurrah over a dark yet punchy beat. The vocals are soaring, and I also think the harsh vocal effects actually fit this song pretty well, especially when we can contrast them to the less filtered and more mellow moments. It also has an after-party-like sound to it, like the late-night thoughts after everything is over, which is a pretty cool note to end the album on, I think. I'm also really digging that last refrain to just hammer in the themes of love and living in the moment that are present throughout this entire record. The other songs on the record are also not that bad, following very much in the sort of traditional reggaeton and pop rap footsteps that you would expect from the more mainstream side of Latin pop. For me, the biggest killer of this album is the length. If we cut this album in half and included the more psychedelic and dark tunes, alongside the occasional reggaeton and flamenco-influenced banger, I feel like it would have been a lot better. The features were mostly pretty good, and the vibes were consistent at least, but almost too consistent, I would say, as many songs just sound like repeats of others or more simplified versions of songs that we've already heard. Vocally, it also felt kinda hit or miss, I have to say, and while I can appreciate the sex-positive lyrics, they occasionally felt a bit one note. If Bad Bunny curated this album more and brought the track list down, focusing more on the layered and psychedelic sounding instrumentals, he would have had a winner here, I think. It would have been pretty cool, but as it is now, it's an album where you kind of weed through the normal stuff to find the diamonds in the rough. I'm feeling a strong 5 on Bad Bunny's newest album. Of course, we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and this one's okay, I think. It's very much a DIY aesthetic. It looks basically hand-drawn. It kind of has that sort of like t-shirt brand aesthetic to it, I have to say. It does fit the more beachy and lazy instrumentals, so I think that is pretty cool. It's just not really my style, I don't think. I think it can maybe come across a bit amateurish, but who knows, that might have been the intent. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this newest album by Bad Bunny. What did you guys think? Do you think this is maybe his best album yet, or is the length really killing it for you? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell if you too are a vampire, and until the next one, farewell.